as I'm standing here, it gets quieter and quieter. Okay, I'm Jean Lincoln. I'm chair of the 100th Anniversary Committee, and I want to take this time to say thank you for coming to our kickoff for the 100th anniversary. I think you're in for a real treat. In fact, I know you're in for a real treat. I've seen some of the presentations that are coming up out of the book. So, as you know, Mark is a member of Our Savers, who was a football coach, and he used to teach a lot of Martin Luther in the Reformation, as I remember. And with Mark is John Sabaka. John Sabaka taught mathematics at Turner High School. Both of them love history, I can tell, because they're excited. So with that, I'm going to let them get started.
Well, I want to thank you for coming today. We've got a presentation I think you're going to find interesting. About a month ago, I get a call, and they said, would you like to give a presentation on the founding of the church and so forth? And I said, well, I suppose. So I started looking into it a little bit. And then I found 2 or 3 of these other anniversary things, and they had the program. And one of them had 7 or 8 speakers. I mean, it was a big deal. So I called the church office and I said, so I'm a little unclear how long you want me to talk. Where am I on the program? Am I first, am I last, in the middle, what's the deal? You are the program. I said, well, that's that. And so anyway, I started thinking a little bit about how to approach this. And talking about the founding of the church in 1918, actually the first service was 1922, I wanted to put some context around this. Good historians always like to place it in time. So I decided to enlist the aid of probably the foremost historian of local Beloit history there is, Mr. John Sabaka. So between the 2 of us, we're going to talk about, he's going to talk a little bit about, you see on the outline there, he's going to talk a little bit about the early history of Beloit, like 1820s, 30s to 1850s. Then I'm going to come in and talk about the church. And then he's going to talk about industrial Beloit. He's got fabulous photos and I think you'll enjoy it. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to hit a number of topics about the war. You can all see them outlined there. Our goal is to be done in 60 minutes. Clock is running. So Pastor told me don't be too late. I don't want to be on the wrong side of the pastor. So we'll do the best we can. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Mr. John Sabaka.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Mark, for inviting me, because I do love to talk about Beloit history. And the one thing that does scare me, Mark was a history teacher. I was a math and science teacher, and once we get talking, we talk and talk and talk. So maybe I'll have my wife kind of give me the cut sign here when I get talking too much. Okay, what I'm going to do is talk about history of Beloit. If you don't mind, I can sit down, and then I can look at the slides too, okay? Thank you for inviting me to speak at the 100th anniversary celebration of Our Savior's Lutheran Church. My part of the program will consist of early history of Beloit, followed by Mark, who will speak on the history of Our Savior's. We will then both look at Beloit as it was 100 years ago. In the 1820s, a whole chunk Winnebago settlement called Turtle Village was located near the confluence of Turtle Creek and the Rock River. Turtle Village had about 700 inhabitants. In 1832, Winnebago chief Whirling Thunder orders the abandonment of Turtle Village as the United States military pursues Black Hawk up the Rock Valley during the Black Hawk War. Abraham Lincoln was a soldier in the pursuing army which camped at Beloit. In 1835, with the abandonment of Turtle Village, James Tebow makes a 3-look squatter's claim of land on the east side of the Rock River. Well, up until then, there was not a lot of settlement in south central Wisconsin. You have settlements by the Lake Michigan, and you have settlements in the eastern, to be honest with Michigan territory there, but I'll keep referring to Wisconsin, where the lead mining was. But with the Native Americans here, South Central was not inhabited. With that Black Hawk War, the natives are going to leave, mostly. So Tebow's going to come, and he's going to make a 3 looks claim. And what a 3 looks claim, he's going to kind of think of where the confluence of the Turtle Creek and the Rock River is. He's going to look as far as he can see. He says, I claim that. That's 1 look. Look as far as he can see. Huge amount of land he could claim, and this would be on the east side of the river, because on the west side of the Rock River, the land had already been surveyed, because you've got the mining interest. So the west side of the Rock River had been surveyed by the government, but the east side had not. So he's going to make this 3 looks claim. Tebow was a French-Canadian trapper-trader working for the American Fur Company. He, along with his 2 Indian wives and 3 or 4 children, built a log cabin near the confluence of the Rock and Turtle Creek. Being a trapper and trader, he was not overly interested in developing the land, but was willing to sell his 3 looks. In 1836, Caleb Blodgett, a land developer and speculator from Meekums Grove, Illinois, now Wheaton, purchases Tebow's 3 looks for $250. Remember that? $250. The purchase of the land in 1836 is considered Beloit's founding, with Caleb Blodgett being Beloit's founding father. With the assistance of Native Americans, Blodgett builds a double log cabin on the banks of the Rock River. To show his squatter's rights to the land, Blodgett hires workers to work the land and construct a mill reeds along Turtle Creek. Somewhere misplaced my pointer, but you see where Turtle Creek is in that slide? Above it is the race that was built there. It says South Race going on, and that's going to be key, because that's going to be where they're going to build up the mills. It would be approximately where St. Paul Avenue is today. On the race, they'd be constructing a sawmill. The lumber from the sawmill would be necessary for building a new community. The once Ho-Chunk village was now referred to as the Turtle or Blodgett's Place. In the fall of 1836, George Goodhue, representing Goodhue and Son, purchases 1/4 of Blodgett's claim for $2,000. Remember, he bought it for $250. He's going to sell 1/4 for $2,000. The purchase included the partially built sawmill. The sawmill is after the sawmill is constructed, the Goodhues also built a flour mill. Now that's going to be huge. This flour mill was the first mill in the area. Farmers could bring their grain here rather than making a mill excursion to Elgin, Illinois. So people are bringing in their grains right or left. The Goodhues were speculators and businessmen with investments in Chicago, Belvedere, Watertown, and a trading post at Midway, which is today's Rockford. They brought the money into Beloit. In 1837, Dr. Horace White, a physician from Cold Grove, New Hampshire, working as an agent for the New England Immigration Company, purchased 1/3 of Blodgett's claim to the settlers from New Hampshire and Vermont. By the end of the year, 60 New England families would immigrate to Blodgett's Place. The New Englanders began to refer to the area as New Albany, after Albany, New York, of course. In 1837, many citizens were not happy with a village being called Blodgett's Place or New Albany. The citizens appointed a 3-man committee to recommend a new name. From here, there are 2 conflicting versions. In one version, committeeman Charles Johnson was searching for a French word meaning handsome ground. Lucas Fisher responded with Beloit, like Bella. The committee and the townspeople agreed to the new name. In a second version, the committee searched for a word that might be manufactured from changing letters from some other name. Colonel Johnson suggested Detroit. The committee came up with the word Beloit. So there is some conflict. I've got to go with the third option. That the way we got our name is they were walking around and they took a rock and threw it into the Rock River and it went, what? And so that's kind of what I say. Okay, here we've got a map of early Beloit, kind of starting at the bottom. Again, you can see on the upper right, the Rock River, in the bottom, you see Turtle Creek, and the race that they built in that republic. St. Paul, which they was called race back then. Tebow's Cabin, they have the Griston Sawmill and Mill, which would probably be where the post office was. Public Square, Horseway Park, no bridge, we have a road ferry. In 1838, marked the occasion of the first steamboat to travel up the Rock River to Beloit from the Mississippi River. So we had steamboats. The steamboat carried passengers and goods. From 1839 to 1845, steamboats made up their way up the Rock River and went as far as Jefferson, making deliveries and giving rides between towns to excited people. I was thinking the movie Showboat when I think the excitement of steamboats. Caleb Lodge's Rock River House served as a lighthouse for the Rock River traffic. However, by 1845, bridges and mill dams had begun to obstruct the river to such an extent that steamboat navigation was no longer feasible. The New England immigrants were religious. They brought Congregational, Methodist, Baptist, Episcopal, and Presbyterian traditions to southern Wisconsin. Other denominations were soon established. The earliest Lutheran churches in Beloit were separately founded by Norwegian and German immigrants. Norwegians formed Trinity Lutheran in 1855 and Bethlehem Lutheran in 1893. Germans established St. Paul's Lutheran in 1873 and St. John's in 1895. A Catholic church was established before the second decade of Beloit ended. Of course, Mark's going to go into much more detail. James Hanchin, a builder contractor and a land speculator from Michigan, moved to Beloit in 1840. In 1844, he supervised construction for Beloit's first dam across the Rock River. He also supervised the construction of Hanchin Hall at the downtown, where Lincoln spoke in 1859. From 1840 to 1855, Beloit's rapid growth and development as a village and farming community greatly exceeded expectations. The majority of Beloit citizens in 1846 were from New England states. And as you can see, if you look at that great part, Beloit was in 1846. You got 340 from New York, I guess up the top. Let's see, you can just see there were only four people older than 60 in Beloit, so it was relatively young. Vermont had a lot. New Hampshire, so we didn't have a lot of immigrants in that day. With such rapid growth, Beloit was incorporated as a village in 1846. In 1844, 7 New Englanders crossing Lake Erie envisioned frontier learning institutions in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. Their meeting led to a series of 4 conventions in Beloit of clergy and laity. The participants, known as Friends of Education, considered offers for frontier colleges and cemeteries. The Friends accepted a $7,000 offer and land from the village of Beloit. So Beloit put up the money, and then it was accepted for building Beloit College here. With the building of more grist mills, such as the Red Mill on the south race and John Hackett's Beloit City Mill on the west side race, Beloit became a bustling milling town. Now looking at this slide, okay, we have Lodge's race, but now this is the dam. Now we've got another, where I guess it's easiest to name, where it says Beloit Paper Mill. That's another race. It's since been filled in because it's water power they need. And that's kind of go over under actually like 3rd Street now, etc. in Beloit. In the 1850s, needing transportation of grain into Beloit and flour out, railroads came to Beloit. In 1852, bonds worth $190,000 were issued for continuation of the Racine and Mississippi Railroad to Beloit. Many area farmers mortgaged their farms to buy railroad subscription. In 1854, Professor Bushnell beds in a far from simple hotel called the Bushnell House. Now, think of where the First National Bank is. Across the street is the park. That would be the Bushnell House, which is later going to be the Goodwin block, or the Goodwin House. And next to Goodwin, they're going to be a little Beloit's opera house. That's all been taken down. In 1855, a portion of the congregation at Luther Valley split away to form a new church in Beloit called Trinity Lutheran. Trinity Lutheran would become part of our story of the founding fathers of our Savior's Lutheran.
So, the story I gotta tell is the history of the church, and it's a convoluted, twisted story, and I'll try to explain it as best I can. So, in the words of Lucy, I got a lot of explaining to do. All right. So, these two guys, our church's origin begins in Norway. 1830s, mid-1830s, Norway, with these two good-looking fellows here. This is Ole Nustad and his brother Anson, okay? They grew up in Newmetal, Norway. And you can see Newmetal is sort of that one in the middle there. And Norway in the 1830s, they were farmers. They've always been farmers. They worked near the coast. They didn't have much industry where they were. And it was tough sledding in Norway because Norway had been dominated by Sweden and or Denmark for centuries. And so there was lots of regulations that native Norwegians had to compete with these outside interests, and they had a heck of a time doing it. So it was very difficult in Newmetal. Also, Ole was the second son. Well, the laws of primogeniture say the second son, he's going to make it on his own because he's not getting the land, right? So for a while, Ole managed the family farm. His older brother actually went in the army for a while. So he ran the family farm. He wasn't making money there. He was a peddler. He was a mechanic. He was even a blacksmith for a while. And but he found it difficult. So one day, he hears there's a guy going to sell some sheep down here in Stavanger, which you can see down on the coast down here. It's that lower one. So he and Anson walked down to Stavanger, and it's their intention to buy some sheep, bring them back to Newmetal, sell them, make a little money. Well, I don't know if he ever got the sheep, but what he did get is he got a bunch of stories. And he met a guy by the name of Anderson Slugvig. You can't make these names up. Anderson Slugvig was there. He had just come back from America. And he had with him a whole handful of letters of Norwegians, a lot of them farmers who'd gone to America and were now doing pretty good. So the guys are fired up. So they go back right away to Newmetal, and they talk to their parents and everybody around them, and should we try to do this? And they finally said, yeah, well, give it a shot. Why not? Nothing's happening here. So, so they get ready to go. So they get on a boat, and they work their way over to Schenectady, New York. And from there, they work overland, working all the way across to Chicago. In Chicago, there is a Norwegian community. They hook up with them. They hook up with a guy named Ole Rennings. Ole Rennings was an older fella. He was probably, 35. And they had explored some land that was about 80 miles north of Chicago. And they said, we want 3 of our guys go down there and check out the land. And they do. They go there, check out the land. And I think against Ole's better judgment, they try to put a settlement up there. The land is poor, it's near a swamp, everybody gets sick. So 2 of them go back and the rest of their families go back to Chicago, and Ole goes north. And when he goes north, he comes to a little town called Jefferson Prairie. Jefferson Prairie is going to become Clinton, Wisconsin. He buys some land. He contacts Anston. He says, Anston, go back to the old country, get some folks, bring them here. I'll build a cabin. We'll try to make a settlement. So Anston goes back to Chicago. He catches a riverboat from Chicago to New Orleans over to Norway, and he talks to a bunch of people. And he's now recruiting these guys. And the tools he used to recruit, okay, is this book right here by Ole Nordestad. And it's a long, long name. The true account of Norwegian who came here in 1837, I think it goes on forever. But it was a very useful travelogue for people to follow. It told you how much money you needed to bring, how much money land would cost, where to buy a boat ticket. I mean, it was very specific for these guys. That and Ole Nadesta had his own article on America. So 100 brave souls, prepared to come to the new world. Okay? Okay, so there are other reasons why people came to America. Economics was one. Okay? Next one, please. And but there were religious reasons also. And now I'm going to try to describe a couple of threads here that I want you to keep in mind as I continue. Norway was a state, it had a state religion. The Lutheran Church in Norway was a state religion. Very controlling, very organized, domineering almost. And that's what most people were. But there's another group. They followed this guy. They followed this guy right here, Hans Nielsen Hall. And Hans Nielsen Hall was a fellow that wanted a different approach. He wanted a more democratic, a more open church and so on. So there became a sect, if you want to call it that, called Huggians. So the followers of Hug were often in conflict with the state-run church in Norway. And that's going to continue on, I think, till 1980. So, for religious reasons, they wanted to come. For economic reasons, they wanted to come. So 100 brave souls get ready to go. They take over a year to prepare, and they get on the next one. So they get on this ship right here, the Amelia. It was a sloop, a lot of them. There were all kinds of things like that. I put a little advertisement down there. They sailed June 12th, 1839, and the cost of their passage across the ocean was $33.50. Not too bad. A lot of money then, of course. The journey took 11 weeks. And you can see, I kind of laid it out there for you. They had a stop over Gothenburg, Sweden. They got to get some stuff. And they would have extended stays. And they weren't on the ocean for 11 weeks. Finally, they traveled to Schenectady, New York. They went up the Hudson River. They stopped at Rochester, New York. There was a Norwegian community. Everywhere they went, they stopped at fellow Norwegians who would greet them and give them hospitality and so forth. From there, they traveled to Great Lakes, and they end up in Milwaukee. From Milwaukee, they walk to Jefferson Prairie, and there they meet up with Ole. Ole, by this time, had established a little farm. He built a cabin. It was called, sometimes the cabin was called the Nadesta Corner. If you want to see it today, it's in the corner of Highway P and the 140. About 2 or 3 miles south of Clinton. So he now has these people, so there's about 100 of them. Now here's his farmhouse in 1925. Okay? Started off as a log cabin, it got larger and larger and larger. Well, we went out there to take a look at it, what it looks like today. And there it is today. Okay? 100 people lived on or about this property for a while, okay? As I sat there, John and I sat there looking at this, in my mind, I could envision the lean-tos and the little, tents and all kinds of stuff. These 100 people living there. All, of course, searching for land. They wanted to purchase land and so on and so forth. About half of them did, right in that area. Okay, we looked up Ole's grave. If you want to go find it, it's right here. That's a marker that describes Jefferson Prairie. And right next to it is his gravestone, and all his family's buried right there. Okay? When I was doing my research in the newspaper, I found a death of his grandson in like 1830 or something. So, interesting to see how these things kind of work. Next one. So here's a drawing of Jefferson Prairie in 1850. Okay? So about half of the people decide to stay in Jefferson Prairie, and they go out and they buy land and they start farms, and the other half were not quite sure, but they heard there was some great land north of Beloit. Okay? So these two guys, and by a remarkable chance, I happened to get the actual picture. It's a little rare because this was in color those days. This is the actual photograph of Bullitt, Gravesdale, and Giesel S. Howard, okay? And that's probably how they would look. And these two guys were going to go explore. So they set out to purchase land. And another photograph, they had to go, there was no bridge in Beloit, so you couldn't get across the river, so they had to go to Rockton. From Rockton, they had to cross at the ferry. Okay? The ferry, they went into Beloit, there was a land office there. Then they proceeded out to what was called Rock Prairie. Well, Rock Prairie is eventually going to be Luther Valley. Okay? That whole area. All right? And there's them going on the ferry right there, actual photo. Okay, after they found what they thought was a dark spot on the world, they returned to the same way they come, purchased some land, they returned with their tools, and they started to build their cabins. Now the spiritual health of the people was also a concern. These guys were all good Christians. They may have squabbled among themselves, you know, over different things, but the guy who was doing most of the preaching in those days, right then, was this good-looking fellow right here. Okay? This is Ellie Ellingson. Ellingson was a Hoggian, okay? He believed in the, you know, the more free church. He was a lay pastor. Eventually got ordained in Buffalo, but he traveled for a long time. Okay, in this picture here, he's about 46 and his wife's about 19. Okay? Doesn't look like she's aging that well. Anyway, his church cabin was built in Muskego. So now you've got three Norwegian communities, the one in Muskego, the one in Jefferson Prairie, and then he's got Rock Prairie. Okay? So after a while, they are becoming prosperous now. They had some ups and downs. They had at one point they had a cholera epidemic which killed 30 people or something out of Luther Valley. But for the most part, they were making their crops, the land was rich, they were industrious as heck, and they were putting themselves to good use, okay? But a need for religious instruction. And some people felt they needed it. Most pastors those days were what you call circuit pastors. They would travel from church to church to church. And one such guy was this guy up here. This is Klaus Lawrence Clausen. I see this guy pop up every time I turn a page. He's in there somewhere. Okay? He was one of these pastors. He was working out mostly on Muskego, but he would travel the circuit. In 1844, you can see him on his sleigh right there. Another one of those photographs. He did a church service in the home of Helen Brandes Brecky. He drove what they call a Norwegian cutter. It's a sleigh, basically. And there he is going there. Well, the guys loved him. Thought he was great. Okay. So in 1844, our boy Bullitt Gravesdale again, he led a committee to put out a call, and basically they hired him away from Muskego. Okay. So this guy here, Clausen, becomes the first resident pastor at Muskego, or at Rock Prairie. He is the guy, by the way, that is going to name it Luther Valley. Okay? So he's their first pastor. And anybody have an idea what he made a year? He'll probably do a little better nowadays. He made $225 a year. But he said he drove a tough bargain. He wanted $100 interest-free loan from the church so that he could buy some land and build a house, which he did. And the one on the left is the parsonage. Okay, it's not there anymore, but that was built. And he actually, you know, then led the efforts to build the church, which is on the right. The old stone church was there for many years. Eventually, when they rebuilt Luther Valley, they took the pews from the church on your right there, and they moved them to Bethlehem Lutheran Church, where I think they're still there today. I wanted to go in there, but the door was locked. I tried to get there, but anyway. So, his house was, or the parsonage was 25 by 30 feet, 2 stories tall. And for several years, until they built a church, he held church services on the second floor. There were at the time 290 souls, 65 families, 2 widowers, 4 widows, 20 young men, 15 girls. August 12, 1846, they built a church. Pastor Clausen then took $100 of his own money to help pay for the church. Another fellow named Mr. Height Smith gave him $100. They had lots of labor, not much money. Okay? So, in the fall of 1847, Luther Valley is built. It served until 1871. Okay? So, our boy, Clausen here, ends up thinking, this pastor stuff's all right, but now maybe they want to make a little more money. So he founds the Scandinavian Print Association, okay? And he founded a newspaper, Norwegian newspaper called The Immigrant. And I tried to, I actually had a copy of it. You can see, this is another Norwegian newspaper. I had a copy of The Immigrant on my screen, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to copy it. I think I had to buy a book or something before I could copy the picture. So I substituted this one. When he did that, the second, and Clausen was not necessarily a state church in Norway. He kind of went along with his Hoggian stuff, okay? I don't know that he actually was, but he, kind of went with the wind a little bit. Enter onto the scene this fellow, okay? Reverend Gustav Frederick Dickerson. He's the second pastor. This guy is a state church guy. He's a hardline state church guy. So right now you start to get some conflicts within that little congregation. Most of the people were probably Hoggians or had lived that way and they voted on everything. Now they got a guy that's going to dictate everything to them. You can go for that so much. He got that out. Clausen, by the way, running his newspaper, he got $300 a year. Plus he got 5% of the newspaper. It was a very, very successful newspaper. Okay? Newspapers often have a political point of view. The point of view of the Immigrant was supposed to be an independent Democrat. Independent and Democratic. Okay? Anybody know anything about the Democrats in the 1850s? Well, think about it. And, but they did say, they made a statement, we're independent Democrats, we won't go through everything thick and thin. It's a little caustic, but anyway. So by 1839, 1855, Luther Valley is a thriving community. But there starts to be diversive issues which are undermining, undertow the church. There's people squabbling. I guarantee you they wouldn't have had a church meeting where nobody ever voted no. Okay, they probably had a little different, more contentious nature to them. What do you think the issue is that started to divide Luther Valley 1855? Want to take a shot at that? I'm already giving you one answer. The Hoggians versus the state church guys. What did this mean? Is it doctrinal? What's the deal? Okay? There were synod difficulties too. Look at all these synods. The Norwegians had 14 synods themselves. That's not even counting the Germans and the others. Luther Valley actually founded the Norwegian Synod. Okay? 1851 to 53, they put it into practice. But there's going to be squabbles with that. So all these little church groups are fighting it out with each other. See, I imagine some of it's just personal politics and other things. I do think that they have big arguments over how strictly you should interpret the Augsburg Confession. There was one group that said, man, that's the law, there's nothing but that. Others took a little more liberal view. But the big issue that's dividing these people is slavery. Now, I've read this stuff up and down and all around until we went out to Luther Valley. We talked to the secretary out there, and I called her in advance, and she had talked to the old ladies that know everything. Okay? They are the fountain of all truth out there, and they said it was slavery. And you know what? We're going to see this over and over and over again. A number of people at Luther Valley, you know, were I don't think they were pro-slavery, but they didn't want to talk about it. And there were some other guys that were abolitionists, so they were pretty anti-slavery. So in 1855, they break away. Okay? So there's going to be 3 divisions of Luther Valley Church. This is the first of 3. Okay? This was the next pastor that showed up. And this is a picture of him and his family. I thought it was neat because it was taken right next to Luther Valley Church as it looked in those days. Klaus Mingelsson was involved in this endeavor there too. He was a pastor for a long time. He was kind of a state church guy, okay? And let's the people we'll go back to this second. I didn't mislabel it. The new church, these people that left Luther Valley came to Beloit and they founded Trinity Church. Well, they didn't have a physical building, okay? So they met in a place called Rogers Hall, okay? It was at the southwest corner of West Grand and 4th Street, down here around the corner a little bit. And I don't know what kind of hall it was. I couldn't find pictures of it, but that's where they met. They met there for almost 20 years, okay? So finally in 1871, they build a church. Meanwhile, let's go back to this guy, okay? This Mingelsson is interesting because he is the first pastor of Trinity Church, okay? They were spelling his name differently, so I was getting a little mixed up once in a while. So this guy had a little different kind of meeting with his congregation. In 1869, this is after the Civil War is over, 2/3 of the membership of Luther Valley quit. They have a congregational meeting. They vote 53-38 to leave the Norwegian Synod. And then the 53, the majority, voted to lock the other guys out. So the 38 are out. They went for services at local schools and homes, and they finally built Orphanville Lutheran Church. So there's the second spawn off of Trinity and all their contention. They also voted to leave the Norwegian Synod. Okay, so they didn't have any synod association until 1918. Okay. So now back to the next one. So finally in 1871, they get some land donated to them. The land is donated by a guy named John Thompson, who John will talk about in a little bit. He was a prominent businessman. He gave the land to build Trinity Church to the Lutherans. So they build this church, and it's just down the street here. You walk by and take a look at it. There's me taking a picture of it. But I put myself on it. Okay? They were part of the Norwegian Synod. Okay? All services were conducted in Norwegian for the longest time. Okay? Meanwhile, back at Trinity, they're still fighting. Okay? The 1870s and 80s featured divisions, again, within the church. I do think some of these were more kind of doctrinal. But, again, I think it's slavery. They're still fighting over slavery. Okay? So, eventually, those guys broke away. And in 1893, okay, they found Bethlehem Lutheran Church, which is 725 Oak Street. Just down the corner around a little bit, and it's a Spanish church today. Okay? So, they're going to stay that way till 1918. So Luther Valley has now been divided 3 times. Okay? In June of 1917 now, some of these battling synods kind of got their act together, and they had a big conference, and eventually they resolved their differences, and they merged. Okay? They became united, the Norwegian Lutheran Church of America. Okay? The merger caused a lot of local churches to rethink what they were doing. So the leaders of Bethlehem, Trinity, started talking, and eventually they decided to merge and have one large church. This is called church notes. Every Saturday they play them. And I just put this up there because if you look up there on the screen, it'll say, this is a union service. So this is in the period before our Savior was built. Bethlehem and Trinity were in the process of merging. So they started to have joint services and different things going back and forth. Okay? Bethlehem Church was eventually sold for $3,000. And the building of this church began with a $3,100 loan, so maybe they coincide with it. Next one, please. So this is a newspaper article from the day, this is a Saturday, the day before Easter Sunday, in which our Savior is going to, have his first services there. Okay? So they sell one church, they start building another one. December 31st, 1918, the allotment church stands. Was purchased for $3,100. I think actually that loan was probably for the building of the church, because I think this Thompson guy gave them the land. They began building in May of 21. Easter Sunday, April 16, 1922, the congregation met at Trinity, and they marched singing songs right in the doors of our Savior's. They had to sing because the organ had not been put in yet. But anyway, more than 1,000 people attended that service. Can you imagine? 1,000 people walking up that little, half a block. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we became our Savior's Lutheran. So John's going to come back now. He's going to talk to you a little bit about Beloit's early manufacturing history. I hope I didn't get you too confused. It's a kind of a twisted mess we weave. We try to use whatever it is. So, John.
One thing I'd like to mention, Mark and I went out to Luther Valley. If you have never gone out there, take a little trip. It's a beautiful, beautiful area with the church there, the cemetery across the street, and well worth visiting. Beloit's early industrial manufacturing. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Beloit had all the factors that would contribute to a successful manufacturing setting. Railway lines, natural resources, a powerful river, Beloit College, and an influx to Wisconsin of immigrant workers with a strong work ethic. In 1844, the Rock River was dammed and a mill race was dug parallel to the Rock River. That's that second one there, which goes down like Horse River. The west bank of the river became a major industrial area in Beloit. The first factory in Beloit was the N.B. Gaston Scale Company, the manufacturer of farm scales and heavy-duty commercial scales. See, they needed watercolor, so that was the big thing. Gaston remained at this location until its demise in the 1930s. Beloit industry boomed in the 1890s. Early industries, such as Beloit Ironworks, number 10, would evolve into Beloit Corp. And Beloit Straw Board, number 14, would become Beloit Boxboard. Just before we leave this slide, we mentioned J. Thompson and Sons. That would be number 11. That's the guy that had donated land to Trinity, his background. In 1896, Beloit Ironworks, a maker of paper machines, built a new foundry on the west side of the Rock River. Before the turn of the century, buyers of Beloit paper machines were generally companies in the Great Lakes region. But in 1897, a machine was shipped to Japan, and in 1902 went to China. Okay, you can just see the race there. So that would be the island for Beloit Corp. And Mark, you want to comment about what's over on the other side of the river there? About maybe he doesn't. It does.
Why don't you explain a race?
Oh, a race. Okay, it's like a canal. It's a waterway because we needed water power, lack of electricity, and so they would dig. And the south race for Blodgett off the Turtle Creek was just too small, so they dug this out. and that's the source of the water power. So you got the Rock River on the far right, then you have today's, well, I guess the Hendricks property, except for the Y, but then you got the west side race, and then the other area.
These were about, I think we got the dimensions, were 15 feet wide,
Yeah.
9 feet deep. And when you dam the river, you could then release the water and it would go down these extensions
Yeah.
and then re-enter the river again. And then you would build your factories over the top of the race. So you'd have a turbine which would spin and power your factory.
In fact, like the iron works, Merrill and Houston were big turbine builders too, so that was part of it. Beloit Machine Works, employing as many as 1,000 men, had woodworking tools manufacturing company. So now we're going up 4th Street, you can imagine. The company changed its name to A.B. Yates with the onset of World War I. Berlin Machine Works wasn't cutting it. Yates Machine was created, Yates American was created in 1925 with the merger of Yates Machine Company and American Woodworking. Just a huge woodworking manufacturing company. Beloit Boxboard was originally a sawmill and then became Beloit Straw Board Company. The company manufactured building paper. In 1907, straw board was purchased and renamed the Beloit Boxboard Company. During the 1920s, straw was replaced with recycled paper, which it still is today, as a raw material for paper making. Today's Brown Swiss Association building was originally built in the Beloit Paper Company. Beloit College foreclosed on a loan to the company and sold the building in 1888. During the next 40 years, the building was occupied by manufacturers. If you look up in the far right there of the slide, you can see many of the companies that were in that. The Brown Swiss Association purchased the vacant building in 1936. In 1866, Leonard Wheeler moved to Beloit. In 1867, Wheeler obtains a patent for a windmill with a secondary vane. In 1872, the windmill was manufactured by L.H. Wheeler and Sons. The company was reorganized into Eclipse Windmill Company in 1880 and to Eclipse Wind Engine Company, etc. You know, when I first thought about that, I thought, oh, that's a small outfit. Look how big his company was, just in the pictures in the 1890s. In the 1890s, Charles Morris merged the interest of Eclipse Windmill Company of Beloit with Fairbanks Morris Company. Morris helped transfer Fairbanks Morris from a scale company to a diversified manufacturing firm, which manufactured items such as windmills, steam engines, diesel engines, pumps, motors, and machine components. In 1893, Fairbanks Morris and Beloit produced internal combustion engines. The company's Model Y semi-diesel engine became a standard workhorse engine for sugar, rice, timber, and mine mills. After World War I, Fairbanks Morris no longer manufactured the classic wooden windmill. When automobiles began taking the roads across the country in the late 19th century, their drivers had no reliable way to tell how exactly fast they were going. Arthur P. and Charles Warner, two brothers of Beloit, a Wisconsin, filled their need with their patent odometer, which was in the middle bottom there, which provided drivers not only with accurate reading of speeds of up to 60 miles an hour, but also kept track of the distance the cars had gone. Okay, thank you. If you go to the Bushnell Wheeler House in South Beloit, they have an one of those speedometers. He was trying to build a meter to register how fast lathes would spin. And it wasn't having much success, and so then he came up with a speedometer, and of course, he's going to sell it to car companies, and a lot of good things are going to happen. One of Warner's advertising gimmicks was to build a gold-plated working model of an early speedometer on a vehicle which toured major cities so bystanders could view the speed. That's what we got in the upper left hand. It's a speedometer on a car. In fact, the story goes, he went by the White House. Teddy Roosevelt said, "What is going on there?" And so Teddy Roosevelt wanted to ride in the car with a speedometer on it. The Warner Brothers, basing many of their business out of Beloit, continue to invest and market many of their products such as auto, truck trailers, electric brakes, and clutches. As part of their interest in advertising and associated with timing instruments, the Warners also served as official timers of the fledgling Indianapolis 500 race. The winner of the Indy 500 still receives the Ford Warner Trophy. In 1844, there were more than 100 cigar makers in Beloit, making Beloit the largest cigar manufacturer in the state after Milwaukee. Cigars were distributed throughout the entire Midwest. Beloit manufacturers were supported by two different railroads, a line for the input of raw materials and the exports of finished products. Norwegian immigrant industrialist John Thompson was the proprietor of Beloit Plow and Wagon Works. In 1877, Thompson would donate the land for Trinity Lutheran Church. Trinity served the needs of Beloit's largest Norwegian congregation and conducted services exclusively in Norwegian. In about 1900, there were 4 Lutheran churches. 2 are Norwegian, 2 are going to be German. They were holding services only in their native language. Atonement, they were all on the west side. 1905, Atonement's going to say, we needed an English-speaking church. And so that's the building of the Atonement. In these churches, let's just say Norwegian, later then would have Norwegian service, English services, and then eventually all English.
As I was looking through things, I was reading these church notes, and as of 1918, they would have 2 services a month in Norwegian, and the rest were in English. So they are transitioning. And then forever, our Saviors was known for the Norwegian dinners and all that kind of stuff. So our Saviors really was sort of a holder of that Norwegian tradition. Well, now we just got a series of little snippets of things. The slides won't take you a second to look at, but just little things that I found kind of interesting. So I looked at the yearbooks of 1918, 1917, 1918. Here you can see the high school where it used to be. You know where the high school apartments are? That's where it was. I'm sure some of the older folks will remember that one was a municipal building and so forth. So it was sat majestically up on that hill, and we talked to a student who'd been there. What was his name again, John? Haven't been at the historical site.
Sorry.
See you in a moment. Anyway, so he talked about going to school there, and when they started with one building and they built the wings on it. Well, and the new building was about a foot lower than the old building. So when you transition from the new wing, you had to step up a foot. He's telling us how all the guys would fall over because they never would see that step. I guess you had to be there. Anyway, all right, so here's the Beloit High School. You got a few staff members. You can see a picture of there. And you got the Beloiter 1918.
When I made this picture, that lady in the bottom with the big hat, she taught cooking. That was her teaching, was cooking.
And they had some interesting things. They had lists, all kinds of lists. How would you like to be known as the biggest girl? I mean, they have lists: the biggest boy, the biggest girl, the smallest, best mustache, and all millions of things. Well, I kind of been associated with football for a while, so I found this striking. I looked at this picture of the football team in 1917 and 18. This little rugged-looking character here was one of their captains. You see the team picture down below. So I just thought it'd be interesting to contrast that with what you might be seeing, on Friday nights or Sundays here. This is a picture of the, not a very good picture, of the statistics page for football. And I only added it because there's a couple things on there that I found interesting. Beloit beat Woodstock High School 91-6. That's a bad one there. And if you look at the statistics, it's kind of faded here, but when's the last time you saw statistics for drop kicks? I actually saw a guy drop kick a ball in a JV football game once. It was a foreign exchange student from somewhere. He was supposed to kick the extra point and it missed. And he's running around and he dropped it, missed it. All right, next one, please. Let's contrast the basketball uniforms. Boys on the left. Ladies have to play basketball dressed like the girls on the right. That probably could have doubled in their swimsuit those days too. Anyway, so he just got a couple little things there. Okay. Beloit did seem to have one thing that was pretty unique. It was called the Beloit Girls Auxiliary of America. Now, the first part of 1917, we're not in the war, the last part we are. And so the build up to the war, you had lots of people very patriotic and so on. So these girls, they met March 8th in the auditorium. They launched an organization entirely new, nationally, of distinct local conception. This is I'm reading from what the newspaper said. Beloit Girls Auxiliary of America, and it contained 50 members aged 14 to 20 years of age. And the organization was formed for the purpose of injecting pep into the war work. Don't hear pep very often anymore. They carried Red Cross packages and aided and assisted other war workers required. And then the last thing they say, the Sunday teas have become an established custom through the efforts of the girls. I don't think we have any Sunday teas anymore. All right. So now we're in the war. I wax on for a long time about World War I and how we got in it, but we're in it. And lots of things are, changing as a result of this. We have some kind of interesting World War I memorabilia up here if you want to look at that afterwards. All right. So one of the things about World War I is that we had a substantial German population, especially in Wisconsin. Now take a look at the kind of where they are. So the Germans were the most immigrants, the Norwegians were second. A lot of them didn't speak English. My mother's maiden name was Hamelin. And my grandfather came over from Norway, from Hamburg, Germany, came on a boat. And when the war started, my grandmother told me that he got a letter from his grandparents that said, "You'll be a good boy, you'll come back home and fight for the fatherland." Well, he went over and fought, but it was with the 32nd Division, the American Army. So a lot of German families were in conflict over this, what to do. So there were efforts to suppress German culture. German newspapers were closed down. Musicians no longer played Bach and Beethoven. The Americans renamed sauerkraut Liberty cabbage. Dachshund was a Liberty hound. And German measles were Liberty measles. Anyway. There was even one group of vigilantes which attacked anyone suspected of being unpatriotic. There was in the Milwaukee Journal a story about a German newspaper guy who was beaten up for being German. Okay? Some Germans tried to hide their names, changing them a little bit and so on. And I found these two things, next one. I found these two things in the yearbook, okay? And a couple of things. If you notice, this is the play, the Christmas play, in 1917. Before the war, it's Das Den Hungerbummer. And it's a German play. And on the right, you'll see the play after we're in the war, and it's called Somewhere in France. So you see a different. And I found a couple things. 3 million Teutons pledged loyalty to the U.S. A Teuton, is a Germanic person. So all over the country, Germans were trying to prove that they were Americans, and so forth. And one I found kind of interesting, there was a German class in some high school in Ohio, and you speak German, a German class, and the girls refused to sing Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, because it was unpatriotic. So you see all kinds of things like that happen. The war itself, It's going to take its toll, obviously. Okay. This is the badge for the 32nd Red Arrow Division. Sometimes they call it the Breakthrough Division. It was made up of Wisconsin and Michigan National Guard troops. And these two guys traced their heritage back to the famous Iron Brigade of the Civil War. If you know anything about the Iron Brigade, they were the most famous unit in the Union Army, and very tough, and all Wisconsin and Michigan boys. Okay? The French nicknamed them La Terre, because they were so rough on the enemy. Okay? We have 3 Beloiters that were given the Distinguished Service Cross. Now that's one click below the Medal of Honor. Okay? So James Hicks, U.S. Army, awarded July 30th, 1918. Wilfred Lloyd, August 4th, 1918. And I'm going to read you the citation for Ray Dickoff of Beloit, Wisconsin. First Lieutenant, United States Army, was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in action while serving with the 127th Infantry Regiment, 32nd Division, in the attack on Fismes, France, 4 August 1918. First Lieutenant Dickoff was shot in the head, the body, and the legs. Although fatally wounded, when the orders came for another assault, he gave the command charge to his company and led the assault until he died. So that's just an example. Going through there, I looked. This was a slide that talks a little bit about population, and I kind of circled the period we're talking about here. So by 1920, we got about 21,000. Now think about 1,000 people marching in this church that first service, and there's only 21,000 in the whole town. So it's kind of a big deal. And this guy on the left, whoops, did I miss one? I guess I did. Yeah, this guy here. I just put this up here because if you look at it, he's from Bethlehem. So there's a very local, connection to them in this church, right? And you can see, again, the boys' population, how it goes. And I recall, it's funny how in 2010 it was 36,000 something. I remember going to basketball games and driving in. I've been looking at that population sign of Beloit forever and ever and ever, and it's always about the same. So we don't seem to go up or down much. Next one. Just little snippets of things. The war was tough on people, especially in Europe. We did not have rationing in the United States for food, but they really urged people to help, conserve food and so on. They had posters urging citizens to reduce their personal consumption of meat, wheat, fats, sugar. Slogans, food wins the war. People, avoid waste and so on. And then promotions, Meatless Tuesday and Meatless Wednesday. So, they got to advertise the different Scoops Market, okay? And you'll notice that it says up at the top, try these for your Meatless Tuesday, as an alternative. And you look at some of the prices, I think they're kind of neat. Let's see. Get a pot roast for 20 cents a pound. Rib roast, 20 cents a pound. Those were the days. So 1917, here are a few of the, the highlights of 1917. Over there was the top song, Till the Clouds Roll By was another one. The immigrant Charlie Chaplin was the tramp. He was the Hollywood hero at the time. Easy Street, Chicago Cubs beat the New York Giants 4-2 in the World Series, and so on. So you get a few highlights from 1970. And in my passage, I just noticed some car advertisements, and I just went down and found a car that was being sold, in Beloit. So anyway, you can buy a new car for $525. And another one on the, and just another cost of living thing. Buy a Ford, different kinds of food sales and so forth. Today, I just read last night that I saw that this year's flu strain is particularly virulent, and you've had 30-some kids die, and it's been a terrible thing. Well, John's going to talk to you about the Spanish flu of 1918, which will make ours look, not so tough.
100 years ago, we had the establishment of Our Savior's Lutheran Church. However, two other significant events occurred: the Spanish flu pandemic and the end of World War I. During the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, approximately 1/5 of the world's population became infected, with an estimated 50 to 100 million deaths worldwide. The virus mutated from birds to pigs, then to humans. The disease eluded treatment. Some patients died within hours of their first symptoms. Patients' lungs filled with fluids, resulting in respiratory suffocation. Unlike ordinary strains of influenza, the flu proved most deadly to those between ages of 15 and 40, due to an overreaction of their immune system. So the young and the old were the safe ones. Worldwide, the number of deaths due to influenza exceeded military deaths of World War I. Wartime censors, in order to maintain morale and recruitment, minimized early reports of illness and mortality due to the flu. The virus got the name Spanish flu because Spain was not a World War I combatant and freely reported the deaths. So Spain is saying, we got all these deaths, see, it must be theirs because they're telling the truth. The influenza was caused by the H1N1 virus, with possible sources including Austria, France, China, and the United States. The pandemic did not discriminate. It was rampant in urban and rural areas, from the densely populated East Coast to the remotest part of Alaska. The flu affected over 25% of the United States population in 1 year. In 1 year, the average life expectancy in the United States dropped by 12 years. The plague emerged in two phases. In late spring of 1918, the first phase, known as the 3-day fever, appeared without warning and few deaths occurred. When the disease resurfaced in the fall, it was far more severe. Health officials could not identify the disease, which was striking fast and viciously, eluding treatment and defying control. The influenza epidemic did not spare Wisconsin. During the last 3 months of the year, 8,459 Wisconsinites died of flu or related causes. However, Wisconsin fared better than most states, primarily due to the role of state government. Wisconsin Health Department took the unprecedented action in October of ordering all institutions in Wisconsin closed. This closure included all public venues such as schools, theaters, saloons, churches, and places of public amusement, with the exception of factories, offices, and workplaces. In no other state was such a comprehensive order issued. The closure stayed in effect until the epidemic burned itself out in late December. Due to the Spanish flu, the Wisconsin Badger football season was shortened to 6 games, with 3 Big Ten conference games and 3 non-conference games. Beloit College lost to Wisconsin by a score of 21-0 in one of those non-conference games. The game with Beloit College was played at Camp Randall Stadium behind closed doors, so you couldn't go as a spectator. With the severity of flu, Beloit's 3 hospitals were kept busy. In 1980, an article entitled "Spanish Influenza Treatment Shares the Recommended Influenza Protocols: Short hot baths and hot blanket packs to ease fever and pain in the back of the legs. This is followed by a cold compress to bring down the fever. Patients were to drink 3 or 4 quarts of water or fruit juice each day to promote elimination through the kidneys and skin, and have twice a day water enemas. At the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the Great War ended. Germany, short of manpower and supplies, and faced with imminent invasion, signed an armistice agreement with the Allies. During the war, 1/3 of military deaths was caused by disease and 2/3 by battle. The treaty that ended officially the war, the Treaty of Versailles of 1919, forced punitive terms on Germany that destabilized Europe and laid the groundwork for World War II. Now again, here's just some headlines put together. 1918, again, 100 years back, last Carolina hurricane dies. Now the railroads had time zones, but now Congress is going to establish some. First airmail, the Sedation Act, can't say bad things about the government. Okay, top radio songs, Type of Rag, okay, Rock, Al Jolson, movies, Stella Mars, Mary Pickford. Please don't take offense, my wife. She's a beautiful lady there, Mary Pickford. Heavyweight boxing champ, you got Jeff Willard. Maybe, wow, look at his name. Defeated Jack Johnson, lost to Jack Dempsey. We just had a solar eclipse, which was something I was fortunate to observe. But across the United States just last year, but that was the one before it. So there's another thing, if possible, there's going to be another solar eclipse in a few years coming up. They're just great.
Okay, I'm going to conclude a little bit by talking about Beloit's transportation system. Again, these are just random things. There were so many things we could have grabbed and stuck in, and I'm worried about time and stuff, but I remember as a young man riding my bicycle out here for confirmation class, and Bluff Street was cobblestones for a while. Some of you probably remember that. And they had these daggone railroad tracks in there. Looked like railroad tracks. And you had to be a little careful when you navigate those on a bicycle. You ended up taking a pretty good tumble. So I was always curious about that. Beloit was very innovative. From 1907 to about 1930, Beloit ran a city trolley. Okay? These were kind of steam powered, and they would travel around. Joe B. Dow, local attorney, Beloit College president, was the founder of the company. The cars ran in one direction in the morning, and opposite in the afternoon. And if you go to the next one, you can kind of see where they were. One on the east side, one on the west side. Okay? So in these days where you talk about public transportation and all this and that, I mean, I guess we're way ahead of our time back then. Okay? And here's a great photo, you know, of the cars in action, and the town, how it looked, and so forth. And I remember as a kid, you know, I could swear I have memories of some of these buildings. Looking at these, you know. Obviously, they changed a lot recently. But anyway, so you see the trolley coming from there. And there's another slide there. And people would walk across the streets, and I don't know if you ever got whacked by a trolley or not. Wouldn't have been good. And all right. Here's another shot. Now remember this is going across the bridge, and right at that building right in front of that buckboard there was a little shanty town. Anybody remember that? You go down these stairs and all these wooden buildings right against the river. I remember that very distinctly. Anyway, Beloit had railroads coming in. Chicago Northwestern Depot was right down across the street from what was going to be TNT Sports years ago. You know? And the other thing that I thought was interesting was something called the Interurban. And this was a train that ran from Rockford, started in Rockford, and went all the way to Janesville through Beloit. It would come right up Highway 2, and then it would come right down 4th Street, all the way to where the Henry Avenue Bridge is. And at the time, that was just a railroad bridge. There was no foot traffic on it. And they would cross there, hang along 51, and go all the way to Janesville. And that would run a couple times. Of course, by the late 20s, automobiles are getting to be a lot more common. And by 1929, the Janesville route ended. By 1930, the Beloit, route ended. So I was always curious about that, so I had an opportunity to read some stories and articles about that. I thought I'd just throw that in there just for giggles. Okay? So I think at that, we have come to a conclusion. So happy 100th anniversary of our St. Lutheran Church. I think I've done a little smorgasbord of things we talked about there on the thing. And I know that John and I would be very happy to answer any questions or anything like that you might have.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and truthfully, I learned a lot that I didn't even know about our church history. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask John and Mark. They're here to try to fill in those blank spots you might have had. So thanks again for coming. And thanks for
Thank you.
Thanks for recording, Bob.